Welcome on today's episode of the Dr. Dean Show. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Elizabeth Zach, and we will be talking about teens, social media, and mental health, specifically asking the question, though, does social media contribute to depression and suicidal thinking?
Dr. Dean Beckloff has been working as a counselor with students, families, kids, and teens for over 40 years. As the founder of the Beckloff Behavioral Health Center, Dr. Dean focuses on children and families that need a little extra help via counseling. Each week with Dr. Elizabeth Zach, we discuss all things family related to help people create the positive family they want to build. Welcome to the Dr. Dean Show.
Welcome again to the Dr. Dean Show. I'm Dr. Dean Beckloff, and today, as I said, our topic is social media, and does it contribute to teen depression and suicidal thinking? Now, over the last 10 years or so, we've been seeing in the research a rise in teen depression and also in suicidal thinking and in a lot of issues. And really, I think it's been about the last 20 years that we've seen this. So we're going to be discussing what makes some teens more vulnerable, perhaps, to the negative impacts of social media. We're even going to talk a little bit about what those impacts are. And then we also want to give some recommendations for parents on how they can help their teen, as well as other information about this topic. We want parents to have a way to navigate through this. Now today, again, like I said, we are joined by Dr. Elizabeth Zach, who is the director of our counseling services at Beckloff Behavioral Health Center. She's a licensed psychologist and is simply an amazing force of nature in all that she does and accomplishes on behalf of the family she works with in counseling. And her intelligence, her wit, and her warmth are experienced by everyone, including those of us who get to work alongside her.
How kind.
And then our guest today, our special guest, is Emma Butler. And Emma is simply the cog around which our company works. At Beckloff Behavioral Health Center, she's the cog, and she tries to keep everybody in line, doing the best she can, and nobody can do it better. So
Thank you.
Emma is our office manager, managing everybody and everything there. But not only is she doing that, she is also currently completing a master's in counseling at SMU, and then she will begin her career in counseling upon graduation. She's been involved in some of the research in this topic today about social media, and so that's why we wanted to invite her to be a participant with us so that we can learn from her as well and some of the research she's found out. Now, the reason this kind of pricked my interest was the lawsuit that was filed last week, and it was by two fairly large school districts in Seattle. And it was made against TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Snapchat, seeking to hold them accountable for the mental health crisis in youth. And some of the things it says in the lawsuit, which I think is interesting, it blames these companies for worsening mental health and behavioral disorders, including anxiety, depression, disordered eating, and cyberbullying, making it more difficult to educate students and forcing schools to take steps such as hiring additional mental health professionals, developing lesson plans about the effects of social media, and providing additional training to teachers. And not only that, I think it was a 90-page lawsuit.
Wow.
And they also said in there the defendants have successfully exploited the vulnerable brains of youth, hooking tens of millions of students across the country into positive feedback loops of excessive use and abuse of defendants' social media platform. Worse, the content that these companies curate and direct to youth is too often harmful and exploitive. I don't know if you guys remember when the whistleblower from Facebook, Frances Haugen, testified before Congress about the same thing, and she said that Instagram negatively affected teenagers by harming their body image and making eating disorders and thoughts of suicide worse. And she provided research that she had gathered with the company.
Back to that.
Yeah. And she alleged the platform prioritized profits over safety and hid its own research from investors and the public. So, Emma, you, like I said, you've looked at the research, you've done some work on that research. I think you were doing a research paper on it and then a presentation as well. What were some of your findings about the impact of social media on teen suicide and depression?
Well, I found, this is all from the CDC, I have my statistics. We have a number of kids who experienced a major depressive episode in 2021 that increased by 206,000 from the previous year.
Wow.
Suicide attempts among U.S. adolescents increased by 31% from 2019 to 2020. And then emergency department visits for suspected suicide attempts in 2021 were 51% higher among girls ages 12 to 17 than during the same
That's
period
50%.
in 2019. Yes.
It's astounding.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Now, I think we know that the researchers suggesting at this point that the pandemic affected all of us,
Yes.
including our kids. But anything else that you...
Yeah, absolutely. I think the pandemic also kind of created like an environment where people had nothing to do. And so I think that's also why these numbers went up. But I found a survey of 1,500 Americans found that 86% of kids ages 16 to 24 reported that social media directly negatively impacts their happiness. Specifically, 85% reported negative effects on self-esteem, 83% reported an increase in anxiety, 81% reported an increase in loneliness, and 79% reported an increase in depression.
It's a lot. Those are troubling numbers.
Yeah, it is.
They're
It
troubling
is.
numbers.
Oh, my word. You know, I happen to believe, and I think in a lot of my reading of the research, they believe this too, that, and it's stated in this lawsuit, it talked about exploiting the vulnerable brains of youth. And so, you know, I do believe that adolescents are going through a tremendous amount of growth and development that includes the brain growth. And I think that does make them more vulnerable to some of the things that we're talking about, like depression, suicidal thinking, that sort of thing. And I hate to say it, but I think we're all easily influenced. Otherwise, there would be no such thing as advertising.
Right.
Exactly.
We're all vulnerable.
Right. Right.
And so what I would say is, yes, of course they're vulnerable because people are in general, but then on the other hand, these are developing brains and that creates a problem in my opinion. Now, Dr. Zach, does that spark anything in you, since you also have worked with teens in your counseling practice?
Right.
And also you're raising two teens.
I have two teen boys who, you know, I feel like this is my world right now. I understand the impact of social media, the preoccupation with social media, right, at this, you know, phase of their life. And, you know, I also read a little bit of research that I think is noteworthy. This was some large-scale research done back in 2018. So you think, you know, add 5 years, and I can't imagine that these numbers wouldn't be higher now. But there was 46% of teen social media users felt overwhelmed by the drama and cyberbullying on these social media apps. 43% felt pressured to only post content that would make them look good to others.
Of course. And that makes sense.
It makes sense. 37% felt pressured to only post content that would get a lot of likes and comments, right? So now it's not only, you know, the pressure to post this content, but posting content that will garner positive, you know, response. 26% felt worse about their own life due to what they saw on social media. Now, I know, and this is many years ago, but as a middle schooler and as a high schooler, back then, right, the social comparisons, the lack of confidence, the learning who we are, our identity, there was a lot of pressure back then. And I think the thing that is highlighted by some of this research is pressure. Pressure. So, we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about, these kids developing brains and what they put and how much time is spent. And so, there's no question that there's an impact, right, on anxiety, on depression, on potentially, suicidal thinking.
So can in thinking about today, I texted my kids because I had two teenage daughters, and I asked them, because I don't remember if there was even any social media back then. And I said, did y'all ever use any social media? This is so awful. Do you remember something called MySpace?
I do.
I missed that.
Little before, yep.
MySpace, that's what they did, a little bit of.
Little bit.
Not much.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until college that they started using even Facebook. They had flip phones. I mean, so if
They
you think
missed
about
that.
that, they're in their early 30s now, and already we already know we've come so far. I think you were about to ask Emma a question.
Well, wondering, what your thoughts are, right, on these correlates to anxiety, depression.
Absolutely. And I think I'm at that age. I'm 24, so I grew up right on the cusp of social media. And so I had a phone maybe in 6th or 8th grade for safety. But it wasn't until late high school or maybe high school, when we got Instagram and Snapchat. But I look now and I'm so thankful that I did not have to grow up going through middle school. But you mentioned the pressure and putting stuff out on the internet that not only will your peers like and will, receive a lot of attention, but also, your best version of yourself.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we all, 3 of us, we have social media, and we only put things out there that's like the greatest thing ever. We don't post ourselves Sunday mornings.
Now, I might do a little cyberbullying. I'm sorry. I've never cyberbullied anybody.
That's
sorry.
good. That's
sorry.
good.
You delete the pictures that don't make you look good.
Or that don't get enough likes.
Or that don't get enough likes. I don't do that, but I guess that is a thing.
And I also think one thing that I saw was that Instagram shows up in surveys the most as the platform that leads young people to report feeling the most anxiety, depression, and worries about body image. And I think about all of the apps out there that can be used to filter your appearance. I've seen comparisons of celebrities where the photo that they put out on Instagram and then what they looked like that night. And I think that pressure of being a young, middle school age, and seeing these doctored images and thinking, why don't I look like that? But that's actually impossible. Nobody looks like that.
And back in the day, we had something similar, but it was magazine covers, models on magazine covers. But those are people that we don't know. We know they're celebrities, and so you can sort of understand that maybe there's some, filtering or work done, photoshopping. But when you see your peers, right, that are using these filters, it's very different.
And when those posts have the most likes, the most comments, and are being received so great amongst the school population, that's what kids want themselves.
And they comment. I mean, again, this is my world. So I have many of my boys' same age, friends. And so I see what they post. And the comments, hot, fire, you're,
Slay.
Gorge, slay, all of this that if you don't get those comments, right, then what does that mean?
What did I do wrong? Yeah. And I also think...
how ugly am I?
Yes.
Yeah, I must be really ugly. I think those very negative terms start coming into the head of our teenagers.
And I think this is another thing that I thought of, probably you guys experienced if you were at school and there was a party, but you weren't invited, or you might have thought there was something happening, but you were kind of excluded. Well, even when I was growing up and you guys were growing up, we didn't really hear about it until maybe the next week at school. But now I wrote, it's an obvious minute by minute rejection, because kids who are excluded, they can tune in and watch the photos, live videos that people are posting from where they weren't invited. And that's just,
Yeah. And I think to piggyback on that, I think that's exactly right. And, a hallmark of this age is this, black and white thinking. They think in terms of absolutes. And so then there's these thoughts of, everyone always gets invited. I'm never invited.
I never. Yeah. Nobody likes me.
Nobody likes me. Everyone looks better than me. And it really can create, some distorted thinking that then again, creates anxiety, creates, potentially some social isolation, depression, and worst case, suicidal thinking.
What is the role of even suggestion? For example, when I was in high school, no one had ever heard of the thing called cutting. Now everybody seems to know about it. How does that affect the teen, in your opinion, in terms of exposure, and then it creates its own monster? I mean, is that accurate?
I think it really came out during the pandemic. I think people, especially on TikTok, they felt kind of safe to talk about any kind of mental illness or, hard times that they had been facing. And I think it has almost become trendy to have kind of like a self-diagnosed mental illness or, hardcore struggle that people talk about on social media. And, if a young child is watching this saying, well, this helped them and I'm feeling exactly what they were feeling, maybe this would help me.
I see it with the kids I work with, where they're learning from each other, but unhealthy coping strategies, and they feel this sense of community, this sense of belonging. Someone else understands what I'm going through, and it can be problematic.
Well, are there other things that you picked up from your research about why our teens are susceptible? Anything else besides what we've already discussed? That may be it, but anything else that you picked up in the research?
Well, I think teens are just really susceptible, and I think the more that they're on their phones, it takes away the social interaction that is just so important. But I also think that, what was I going to say? It was so important. There was a study done. I can't find it in here, but every time we pick up our phones or log onto our social media, we get a rush of dopamine. And so we're tricking ourselves into thinking that it's a reward every time we check social media.
Right.
And so it's just the vicious cycle when it's not rewarding at all.
Yeah, I saw that in the research too.
Yeah. Well, and there was, there was a Netflix show, you remember, was it called Social Media? Where it talked about how it's purposeful, the notifications that pop up, and so that you're immediately drawn back to your phone, right? To see who liked my picture, or that it really is purposeful. And with kids, it does create a disconnect from real world, right? I was with a group of ninth grade girls last night, and the first thing they did, they hadn't seen each other in a while, and the first thing they did was gather real quickly to take selfies to then post. And it just, it was strange to me that, this was their automatic, not connecting just naturally in the moment, but to have this moment where they had to all, and then, don't post that one, let's retake it. And, it really, there's a disconnect there, for our kids.
Well, and we have to remember too, what is the point of these social media platforms? To make money. Now, I'm not discounting that. I'm not saying that's wrong, but that is the main purpose, and the goal is to advertise and make money. And so I don't know that they're necessarily trying to tweak it that way. Maybe they are, but there is a point, and the point is not what the kids are getting on there for, and it's not what I'm getting on there for.
Right.
I read this was just astounding. TikTok now has over 138 million active users in the US and has been downloaded over 2.6 billion times, which is astounding to me. Anything else that you've garnered in that? What might enhance the depression and the anxiety and that sort of thing?
I remember it was in my presentation that I gave that I think it might be the 10-second loop of a TikTok is, I think, the exact amount of time where you catch interest, you're interested, and then you're bored and you want to move on. And the videos on TikTok are specifically meant to target that in your brain and then be able to move on quickly to the next. And so it's just so easy to get stuck for hours.
Oh, yeah, looped in.
Yeah.
Which is by design, correct? I think it's by design. Now, one thing that I found here, online social networking also leads to increased exposure to and engagement in self-harm behavior due to users receiving negative messages promoting self-harm, emulating self-injurious behaviors of others, and adopting self-harm practices from shared videos. Another point is greater time spent on social networking websites led to higher psychological distress. The more time, the worse it is.
Yep.
So this is a question for both of you. What perhaps can make a teen developmentally more vulnerable and susceptible to the negative effects of social media? Do you have a thought about that?
You know, we've, in some of our,
And we've already alluded to it, I know.
well, no, I was going to say in some of our other podcasts, we've been talking about the growing brain. And we've talked about the fact that, you know, the frontal lobe does not develop until, 24, 25, some research is suggesting. And we know frontal lobe is what's responsible, you know, for problem solving, for higher level thinking, self-awareness, insight,
regulating your mood.
regulating your mood. It's kind of the behavioral and emotional control center. And so, you know, we're expecting these kids, you know, to have some of these skills, but their brain isn't even fully developed.
Right.
And so, you know, I think, you know, it does create more vulnerability. I was
Yes.
also going to say, we also know there are gender differences. I've read some research, and I think, and I see this a little bit.
I think you alluded to it just a few minutes ago about girls in particular, 50% have, yeah.
Yes.
There's
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the emergency department visits for suspected suicide.
Yep. We know that girls are more relationally attuned. They're more sensitive to interpersonal stressors and emotions. And
We, however, are cavemen.
and have no emotional connection, right?
Nope.
Right. But it, you know, when you think about what social media is, it's all about relationships, right? And so there has been some research that has suggested that, you know, while our boys are not necessarily at an elevated risk for suicidal behavior, that our girls are, and I do see that with my sons. They just don't get as wrapped up in the content.
They don't take it as personally.
They don't take it as personally, and so I think we have to be mindful of that with our young girls.
Can I piggyback off of that? I found this other point in research really important, that getting involved in that looping that's there, it negatively strengthens the neural pathways that need to be growing towards helping the developing brain of that adolescent to have greater impulse control, greater attention, better regulation of mood, and these things are probably detrimental to that growth. In fact, making them go in the opposite direction, where inattention, unable, because the brain is used to this never-ending cycle of stimulation, and so it's not growing in the ways that it needs to. So we're looking at insults to the brain that are psychological, but we're also looking at potential psychological insults to the developing brain because it's not learning to do the things it needs to do, because it's in that loop that never ends that they can stay on for hours. Yeah.
I haven't read any research, but I would be curious to know, to read more research on the increase in what appears to be more ADHD and if there's a correlation, right, with social media.
Well, it makes sense that it's going to stimulate those problems.
Yep.
Impulsiveness, inattentiveness, inability to manage mood, that kind of thing. You were going to say something.
I saw something, I can't remember where it was, but it was a kid watching a movie, like a teenager, and the movie was on in the background on the big TV, and they were playing a video game in their hand, and trying to while watching the movie, and then their phone was next to them and they were scrolling through their phone. So, just sitting there and watching a movie isn't stimulating and, quickly rewarding enough where they have to, play the video game and check on social media.
I'm going to throw my husband under the bus, but I see it with him. He'll have football on the TV. He'll have his laptop that he might be doing something with, and then he might be playing solitaire down here. I'm like, that's a lot going on there.
But solitaire is necessary, please. There are some things that you just can't not give up.
Solitaire. Yes, yes.
Anything else in your research that you wanted to speak to?
I don't think so. I just think that it's really simple because kids at that age are so susceptible to anything, negative towards them. They take things really personally. And I think even if a kid isn't aware of that they take things personally, if they get, a negative comment on something that they posted, it could easily spark I knew it, or you know what, they're right. Maybe maybe I am not that great. And I think then they could be seeking those things out and maybe posting things that would, kind of get back a little more negativity because that's what they kind of were assuming in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think it's just kind of a vicious cycle where kids are just so susceptible to anything and impressionable at that age where, people take it and run with it.
Yeah. And hide behind, I think that's the other thing, the anonymity, right? So, these things aren't shared face to face, but when you're behind a screen and, it's very different. We haven't really talked as much about cyberbullying, but I mean, that's another big problem.
The fake accounts. The
fake accounts.
Yeah, it hurts. Okay, so $1 million question. What's a parent to do with all of this? I guess, who was it that said just stick the teenager into a barrel and seal it up until they're 30 and then let them out?
And then let them out.
Yeah. What do you do, how do you, and are we saying here, never let them have any social media apps? I don't know how you control that, but never. I think it's really a question that this society is wrestling with right now, and I think a lot of parents are wrestling with.
Yeah.
How do I handle this? But, sometimes simple might be the best way forward. What's some steps that we can take to move forward? Emma, what can a parent do in the situation, knowing that we've got a rise in depression, suicidal thinking, body image issues, not eating like they should be. Of course, sleep is affected.
Well, I have three things. I think the first thing, I think that saying no social media at all, I think that could be just kind of going in the wrong direction, because then I think a child is going to feel further separated from their peers and not really a part of it. But in some cases, I'm sure it's 100% necessary. The second thing is that I think it's important to kind of keep an open dialogue. I remember growing up, my parents said that, we would never be in trouble if we told the truth. And so I think if your child can come to you and say, hey, somebody said this to me on social media, what do I do? People are just saying this about me. Like, how do I respond? I think that's really helpful.
Absolutely.
And the third thing I put is, if your child is old enough, without making them overly nervous or anxious, I think it's really important for parents to teach them about the predators online who, will act and present exactly as your child's age and interests, and be there for your child if they're down, when the parent might be like marginalized, and then a predator can step in. And I think it's so dangerous. That's probably my biggest thing, because everyone is like a stranger on the internet, and I think that's where these predators really thrive. So I think educating your child about that too.
Absolutely.
I would agree. I don't think it has to be all or nothing. I have there was a young child that whose parents were very rigid about the age that they were going to allow social media. And I mean, and he was older. I think that they finally allowed it in high school, and he felt very disconnected from his peers, and it created, kind of the opposite that I think that they had intended. And what we haven't talked about that I think it's fair to talk about, there are some positives that come from social media.
Connection.
There are some positives. The connection, the the sense of belonging.
You can find groups.
You can find groups.
People have the same interests if those aren't available at school.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We have kids who may struggle with social anxiety. That this is a way that they can connect socially, that maybe they don't feel as comfortable face to face. So I think it is important to know, and social media is not going anywhere. I mean, despite everything that we're talking about, it's not going anywhere. And so teaching kids how to use social media in an appropriate way with kind of those conversations. I do think that we have to consider age when we're talking about social media. Learning some of working with our kids and the population that we work with, also doing some of the research. There really is sort of a 12, 13 is probably an age, I think, that we can begin considering social media. Elementary age, I think, is probably too young.
I think so too.
For lots of reasons. But talking to kids about, I talked with my own boys, just because they have the phone, I purchased that phone, right? And so, I can do spot checks. And I will do spot checks, especially when they were younger. I think that's more important, that parents know that they do have that influence and they do need to be monitoring content. And then, as you said, having those conversations. I know, I think it's helpful for teens when we're able to say how social media impacts us as adults, right? That this isn't just a kid issue, that adults have FOMO, fear of missing out. Adults have, oh my goodness, how are they going on all these vacations and what am I doing that I'm not able? And so having that open dialogue.
I think that one all the time.
Absolutely. It's a common thought. So having these conversations, so that we help our kids to develop a healthy relationship with social media.
Yeah, I agree so much with what you're saying, because I think we can take a developmental viewpoint about what we allow, and knowing that the end result is they're going to be adults and they will make their own decisions. So we have to let go as they get older. Bit by bit, maybe a lot some years, because they've really had some big jumps. And I love the point that you made too about relationship, being able to come to your parent. You said that too. That's incredibly important, to be able to have that open relationship. Now, did you have anything else? I had a few things again.
A couple other just quick thoughts. Especially with our younger kids, in terms of recommendations for parents. I think it's fair for parents to ask for the phone at night with our, younger teens. I think it is, with this desire to constantly, be inundated, setting some just basic limits, no phone at the dinner table. When we're doing family activities, we put the phone away. I think these are all things that parents can do to promote connectedness, to promote staying in the moment rather than, everybody's on their phone. During homework time, I think my boys have struggled with that. They get very distracted,
Oh.
right, with those dings and notifications. And we've had to learn how to put our phone up and turn it off when we're studying.
And that, in my reading of the research, is important, that they learn how to say no,
Yeah.
that they learn how to put it down.
Yeah. And
That
to
they're not
log
gonna
on,
pick it- yeah.
purposefully logging on.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I think can be very helpful.
That's
is-
enhancing that brain.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the neurons that I can turn this off, and this is the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's my choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just looking at it from a big scale, I kind of thought, well, what do families need? They need to promote activities that promote adolescent executive functioning and well-being. And that includes sleep, it includes physical activity, distraction-free homework, and positive interactions with family and friends, with real people. So if we can look at that, I think, as the overarching, there's where we need to go. That's the simple step. Another thing, and both of you have alluded to this too, maybe even having a family meeting once a month, every couple of weeks, where we talk about this issue with everybody, get everyone's input, get everyone to be talking about it. One of the things that I thought, you know, the research shows the longer your teen is on these apps, the worse it gets for them, and the more at risk they are for depression and suicidal thinking and the body image issues. So I think we can be frank with our kids about that. It's not healthy.
Right.
So what are some rules that we're going to have in our family about that? And I love that about maybe no phones at the table. Certainly not when you're doing schoolwork. What was the other thing you said? Maybe even everybody puts the phone
At night.
away at night at a certain place, unless they've gotten older. And as a parent, you've decided it's time to no longer be in that kind of role.
My parents did that with me.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to have my phone upstairs, I think, until I was a freshman in high school, sophomore maybe. And I hated it, obviously. But it has carried through with me. And at night, you know, I remember that, and I remember how great I went to sleep and how quickly I went to sleep, where I try and, you know, maybe don't keep my phone right next to me all the time at night.
And that's promoting sleep,
Yep.
which
Yeah.
teenagers
So important.
need
Yeah.
desperately. Another suggestion, swap screen time for real time. Exercise and free play are among the best ways to build attention during childhood. Exercise and free play. And so what can parents do to be intentional with their kids that maybe they will get out with them? You know, sometimes I just want to sit on the couch and watch a show, but maybe I need to be intentional about getting out with my kids. We're going to go to the park.
set
We're
the
going to go
example.
do something. We're going to go meet some real people. And, you know, being intentional about doing real life things. And we're not going to have our phones with us. That thing that I just mentioned, practicing restraint, your child's brain won't inherently want to set aside a device that's delivering entertainment.
Right. And they're going to push back.
Yeah.
They will push back.
Yeah.
And if you're already to the point where maybe some of these rules or some of these limits haven't been set, it's not too late, right? It's
Right.
not too late to set the limits, but no, there's going to be pushback.
Yeah.
But they can learn to modify.
And that's important. Maybe the pushback is even important. That maybe the conflict about that might be important in terms of their brain growth and development.
Right.
When you practice stopping, it strengthens those connections in the brain to allow you to stop again next time.
Yep.
So our kids learning how to stop, that's important for the brain development. And then tech has its own tools for helping. TikTok, they have a screen management setting. There's another screen thing called family pairing that the parent can pair with TikTok, with their child's TikTok account. And I think that should just all be out in the open, you know, as you talk to your teen. And then finally, if you need help, there's help. There's counseling for the teen, maybe, family counseling to help with setting up some of these boundaries and what we can do. So,
I will add, I had, and this really speaks more to content rather than time spent on some of these apps, but I had a conversation with my boys when they first were starting to text and use social media and comment. Just a general rule. And I told them, when you're considering posting a comment, texting someone, snapping a picture, are you okay if any of the people that I'm going to name read the text, see the text, your grandmother, your coach, your school principal, your church pastor, or a future boss. And if any of those are no, that you would not be okay if your Gigi read one of the things that you just posted, then you don't post it. And I think we have to be talking to our kids about, we didn't get into this topic, we could talk about it for hours, but also about the fact that what they're posting, it doesn't go away, right? And kids don't understand that or don't think about that. And so some of these things follow them. And so they have to be, I think we have to educate them, right, about, what they're sharing and how they're sharing it. And, being mindful of the potential future consequences of doing so.
There's been a lot of news articles about, I think kids who have gotten full ride scholarships to their college for a sport, and that was all taken away by some video that they circulated, 6 years before. And so I think I've unfortunately seen a lot of them, and I think those serve as great teachers where you can kind of let your kid read it and then they can make the decision themselves.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, both of you. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Zach, for your words of wisdom. Emma, thank you for sharing with us not only your words of wisdom, but even the research that you did. And I think this is a timely topic that's not going to go away. So thank you again.